Welcome back, everybody. I'm Art Baudo. I'm one of your hosts here, and thanks for, I hope everybody got a lot of information out of the keynote here. And I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Jasmine here, and pink is the color of the day.
Pink is the color of the day because it's Wednesday.
That's right, and we both look good in pink, so
Yeah.
that's what it is.
I think so.
But more importantly, we're joined by a couple of guests over here. So do the two of you, would you like to introduce yourself and what you do here at AWS? So Vivek and Sabit.
Hi, I am Vivek Mishra. I'm a senior product manager in AWS product backup team, and I look over some of the platform capabilities around ransomware recovery protection areas within the product.
And my name is Sabit. I'm a worldwide solutions architect, part of the AWS backup team as well. Yeah.
All right. So for those who don't know, I think we're going to talk a lot about data protection, backup. Vivek even has it. It's so important on his shirt today as well. But I think this is a really important topic because so many people out there probably have heard of issues that happen with things like ransomware and backup and stuff like that. So today, maybe we can talk a little bit about what AWS Backup is to just baseline for anybody out there.
Sure, I can start with that. So AWS Backup as a service was launched back in 2019 to meet the customer need around data protection, centralizing that data protection across AWS services and the hybrid workloads that they have. You can think of in terms of scheduling your backups, setting retention for your backups, doing restos as needed, performing compliance audit on your backups, and then centralizing a lot of these policies so that you can scale across your organization. So that was a core need that we wanted to satisfy when we launched this service. And it's all built into one service. And so it makes it very easy for our customers to onboard their AWS workloads and bring it onto the service and do all of it in one place.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the features that we're looking at here.
Yeah, so today we will talk about specifically the Resto testing capability. And I can start with the customer problem first. So what we were trying to solve with this is that customers do trust AWS Backup for their data protection needs, but they trust a service that we will manage the integrity of their backups during transmission, during storage, and during processing of data. But customers still have a need to assess the restorability of that data for several reasons. They want to verify the integrity of their backups, whether the backups are really functional, whether they're uncorrupted and ready to use when they really need it. And the interesting use case that's been so prevalent in the industry is that ransomware. So ransomware has become such a high priority thing for every customer that they want to know whether their backups are recoverable in some tested, whether they're in air-gap solutions, which then allows them to bring their business back online. Secondly,
and I think I would assume they also want to run this at speed as well, right? When you have I was just listening this morning, someone is having a big ransomware problem, a healthcare system, and it's taken them over 2 weeks already to be of kind of any semblance of normal. I don't know what that means for that organization, but I imagine that 2 weeks is a business liability for a lot of companies as well. So also this is about the speed with which you can utilize that backup should you need it, and hopefully you don't. But
correct. Yeah. So that's also some of the capabilities we have within the product. So we have this new logically air-gap vault that we launched in preview last year, and we intend to launch it in GA this year, which actually addresses that need of how do you get back on your feet as soon as possible. So I'll give you a sense of that while we integrate that with Resto testing. So customers have the second need that we sort of got feedback is that they have certain RTO goals within their organization where they need to know what is really the resto time for each and every resource so that they can build a run books, they can assess how long it'll take them to bring their business online. And thirdly, since we're dealing with a lot of customers in very regulated industries like finance, pharmaceutical, healthcare, they have compliance requirements that they need to follow. They need to audit those. And this was a need, and trying to do this at scale on their own was turning out to be very difficult for a lot of our customers. So it's high on their priority, but still the scale is so big that trying to do this, doing their own custom scripts and managing was turning out to be very difficult. So what we've done with this feature is we have now sort of provided a native capability where you can bring it all together. You can end-to-end perform all your tests, and then report on these tests for your compliance requirements. So I think we'll jump to the demo, but in a nutshell, I'll give you a sense of what this feature is all about. So what it allows you is that it allows you to automate your scheduled resto testing plans. So you can bring together your resources, your configurations, all in one place in a plan, and then execute them on a scheduled basis. You can also bring in your own validation tests so that once you perform restos, you can also verify whether those resources are really like free of malware, free of like they're actually functional. Secondly, it provides you assessment of how long it has taken for that particular restore to happen. So you get that in a nice report where you can see, okay, I'm taking X number of minutes to bring this specific EBS volume back up, which is required further down for my application to be online. Then lastly, it helps through AWS Backup Audit Manager. It helps you to assess the compliance status and generates audit reports as to what is the threshold that each of my resources are sort of managing in terms of being restored within a certain time. So if I need to get all my resources back up within 5 minutes, are my resources doing it under 5 minutes or over 5 minutes? It then helps you sort of readjust your runbooks so that you can do it in a way which meets your organization needs.
So I'm excited to see, sorry to Jasmine to jump in for a sec. I'm excited to see the demo, but also one of the things I heard you mention is how it is connected to other AWS services as well, so that if many of our customers take advantage of a lot of different services that are out there. So the ability to be able to have this integrated across services and across applications. And also, a lot of this feels like it's a discussion about preparation. As well, right? Being prepared for something that may happen. So I think we need to get to the demo here
I want to
as
see
well.
the demo. I'm
I want
excited
to see
the demo and see how it looks in practice. So,
Awesome.
Subit, what do you have for us?
Yeah, sure. So hopefully everyone can see my screen here. So if you actually visit the AWS Backup Console, there's actually a section that we added. Part of the release was restore testing. And if you go into the restore testing page, this is this console where customers get to see all of their restore testing plans that Vivek was talking to about. So let's go jump in and create a new restore testing plan, and then understand like how it functions and helps you simplify the validation process. So if I would ideally want to get started with a name to identify the restore testing plan. So and then the first and foremost important thing for you to understand is the frequency at which the tests are done. So there's multiple options given by AWS Backup, but it purely depends on how often customers would want to perform the testing.
Right, and this may be very organizational dependent,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Depending upon what your needs are, the frequency, that sort of thing as well. And there is a default here, as you're showing.
Yeah.
Like our default is daily.
Yeah.
So okay.
So because of the there's a cost associated with performing a test, as obvious it would be. We don't want customers to be too aggressively doing the testing, but we are giving the choice to the customer as well. So let's pick the default option of daily, and we also give customers the option of deciding at what time zone this particular test can be run. So we are defaulting to the local time zone now, but it doesn't stop us from picking up any other time zones in which the testing can be done. And this is where, and we also have a window in which the testing can be started using AWS Backup. And the more aggressive windows you pick up, the console will obviously warn you, saying that, okay, this start within window. It's kind of too aggressive, and you don't want to be doing that one because the validation is an async kind of a process where it can happen behind the scenes. So.
And I notice here that we're starting at 0:30 or just after midnight, essentially. But you tend to do a lot of this backup and restore process when everything is not online at the moment, right? So, and also this takes advantage of cost as well for customers. It's not as high usage, especially in Los Angeles at that time, right? Okay.
And once we have picked up the time in which the testing has to be done, the second obvious thing is to decide what are the backups or the recovery points that you would want to test. So in AWS Backup, there is a concept of a AWS Backup Vault. This is actually a logical container in which you kind of group all of your backups. So customers might have created multiple backup vaults. So you can either decide to do testing as a whole on every backup vault available, or specific vaults that you would want to do. So the choice is to then go pick up the backup vault in which you will have to test. So I've got a simple demo vault that I've set up called the Forensic Vault, and I'm picking that one for the scope. So now what it means is that any recovery point that is actually created within this particular backup vault will be picked up for my restore testing.
Okay.
Yeah. And then once we have decided when to run, what to be testing on, the next obvious thing is to decide what is the scope of your testing. So as you can see, there's an eligible recovery point selection that is being given to the customer. So you can decide and say that, okay, I want to test only the last 7 days of backup. So this is in line with customers' expectation that I will be keeping my backups for the last 14 days, and I want to ensure that these 14 days backups are good in nature, kind of thing.
Okay.
So I would say the last 7 days backup is what the scope of your testing. And the final entry that you would have to pick up is whether you want to test the latest backup that is being created. So imagine you do a daily backup and you keep it for 14 days. You want to test the latest backup that is being created, or you could ask AWS Backup to do a randomization and pick up one of the 14 different vaults. It will be random in nature.
Why would you randomly do it?
Yeah. So if you keep testing the latest backup, there would always be a particular time that is required to restore it. But if you had to go randomize a certain thing, you would have various metrics on how often the change in the lineage of the recovery point would have an impact on the restorability. So probably if you're testing the fourth day backup, which might be the case in the situation of a ransomware attack, because every other backup was corrupted and the fourth one was the good one, you still have to know and understand what was the time required to do a testing, kind of thing.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
So,
We are live, so we're on Twitch. So we have a question here, and we have our lovely friend Kong answering questions for us in the chat. But as these questions are coming in, someone has asked, what are the recommended strategies for implementing access control mechanisms using AWS Identity and Access Management to ensure a strong identity foundation and the principle of least privilege as it relates to the context of AWS backup and data protection? So how does AIM work with backups?
So with IAM, there's actually multiple avenues in which you can implement the principles of least privilege. So with AWS Backup, you've been given a choice of the IAM role that is performing the restore testing on your behalf. That's the first and primary thing. So which means that you can actually have the principles of least privilege set up to ensure only the required permissions are provided to a role that will be performing the restore testing. So that's one part of it. And at the AWS Backup Vault level, you can apply a resource policy that will ensure that only certain recovery points that are meant to be restore tested, based on a tag that you apply on the recovery point, that will be picked up for testing. That way you can implement an attribute-based access control. And finally, there will be a service control policies that you can apply at the entire account level to ensure that nobody is performing a test that they are not supposed to be doing. Yeah.
Got it.
all right.
Let's get back to the demo. What else do we have?
So once we have created the restore testing plan, the next obvious selection that you have to do is to pick up the resources that will be in the scope of the restore testing. So we defined when the testing has to happen, what vault the recovery points will be picked up, but we also give you extended selections so that you can decide what resources are picked up for testing. So if I would want to do an EC2 testing in my restore testing as the first one, so I would say EC2 selection, and then this is the place where we talked about the IAM role selection. So you can either choose to have the default IAM role or a custom IAM role that you have followed the principles of least privilege and then picked up to be giving only EC2 permissions, kind of thing. But for the demo purpose, let's go with the default role. And this is the most important capability of restore testing, where because testing will require us to create a transient resource, ensure the recoverability, and then delete it after it's done. But some customers have always asked us, okay, you've done the recoverability testing of the resource, but what if I want to run out my own validations? So can you keep the resources for a certain amount of period so that I can use my custom validation workflows to test the resource as well?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So there is an option of you picking up a number anywhere between 1 hour to 168 hours, which is like 1 hour to 7 days kind of thing. And you can then say, this temporary resource that is created by AWS Backup testing can be retained for that particular long. Yeah.
So is there a default for how long, or the generally recommended principle on how long you want to retain this? I don't know. In my eyes, like 1 hour is like I could go away to lunch, and so I would never be an hour person. But
it depends on the resource. So and what validation tests you have. So if your application is taking a fair amount of time to get there, and there are multiple tests, you can do it within a few hours. Then set it under 24 hours.
Okay.
Or use up to 7 days. I think we don't know of any practical use case where you'll go beyond 7 days. So I think you should be able to wrap this up within that time. And as soon as the validation is done, we start the cleanup process automatically. So you don't have to come in and say, okay, now I'm done. Now let me go delete the resource.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the automation manages that end to end.
All right. That's key. Because a lot of people forget to delete stuff in general. Like cleanup is an important part of every aspect of what you do, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is actually the maximum time you will retain the temporary resources, but within that window, if you ever your validation workflow is completed and you call the validation update API, the resources will be cleared out immediately.
Okay.
And then now we have picked up, retention time and the IAM role for a particular restore testing. This is where you would be picking up the resources in scope. And because now I call the selection to be EC2, I would be picking up the resource type to be EC2 because like that's a logical name connection.
Yeah.
And then this is where you have an option of either testing every EC2 recovery points or a specific protected resource that you have in mind. So this could apply if you want to perform testing very specific to one EC2 instance, or would be wanting to cover as a generic one for every EC2 instance type. So I would just rather go with all included resources in this resource type. And with the restore testing, obviously, customers will always want to have a parameter being passed to the restore testing. So there's actually options of providing which is the subnet they would want to use, what's the IDMS to version 2 setting to be used, security groups, IAM roles. So these can be customized based on your test setup. And and if you don't want to use any of these things, you can default to every other option, and then just assign the resources. So what now happens is that there is actually a testing plan that we defined saying that, okay, start at like 30 minutes past midnight, and this is the time zone that you would be using, and this is the role that you have to pick up for testing.
Right.
And now I've said, like, apply this plan to a set of resources that I've picked up, which is my resource selection. Yes. So that's how the simple resource selection plan is. And when you're done with this particular selection, you can see your restore testing would come in the list of plans that you've created. And the last runtime will be shown as to whether AWS Backup have picked up for running or not.
Okay.
So let me, sorry.
Go.
So let me show you a demo of what happens on an actual plan that has been executing for some time. So as you can see, I've got a few resource selections I've done on this particular plan to pick up S3 resources, RDS resources, EC2, and all those things. And every restore testing job that has been executed, part of this plan, is actually under this section. So you can see that every restore testing job information is actually available here. So customers can combine information and see what is the status of my testing that's happening.
Right, and they can see, in this case, everything is completed, noted by the green completed word, my favorite word when I see the console. I want to...
Yeah, but if something is not successful, it would also show that in here as well.
Yes, that's right. So if I go back into my previous screen and click on one of the restore jobs, you can see that there's specifically 3 different status here.
Okay.
The first status talks about whether the restore testing was done as a job itself. The second option would be to look at the deletion status. So we are creating temporary resources on behalf of the testing, and deleting this resource is very critical because if not, we will be ending up paying for the transient resource there.
Right.
But the most important aspect of this validation is the validation status check. So what AWS Backup as a service provides is integration with EventBridge. So customers have option of defining a simple EventBridge event rule to say that they want to be notified when a restore job state change has been done. And you can have a target of a simple Lambda function that would be picked up for performing the post-validation.
Okay.
So this is the workflow that I talked to you about earlier. So in this Lambda function, I've got an option of calling an API that will be the status of the restore testing. So as a simple example, for an RDS instance, you might be running a few SQL queries to understand whether this RDS is indeed okay. So you can run count of staff from an employee table. And if the count is actually equal to 100 or less than 100, then you say the testing is valid. And I can go back and update the status of this validation and then say it has been successful.
Okay.
So I don't want to cut you off too much, but unfortunately we're under a time crunch here, and we only have about a minute left. And I know we had plans to potentially try to show either some of the protective graph or the backup audit. So maybe we could show perhaps one of the graphs, because I'm a graph person, I'm here.
So the Backup Audit Manager framework that Vivek talked about is actually in screen here.
Okay.
And there is a specific control that will be asking whether the restore time for resources have been met or not.
Yep.
So this way you will be able to validate whether the restore testing has been done properly. And the graph is actually in the protected resources section where you can actually go into an instance. There's a restore time history that you can see. And you can see that specifically in here, there is the testing time that is taken. So it is actually performing the testing under 1 minute, but that's why it's a flat line. But if you have got a different
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just a note for those who are very familiar with the console, this is the typical where you would go to get a graph in the console, period. So this doesn't, this represents kind of just an add-on to what we have done.
Yeah.
So I want to thank both of you for joining us today. This is pretty exciting, and I love demos, love graphs, and even more the backup and restore.
Where do you go next? I heard that you can go to the documentation. What are we looking for?
Yeah, so we do have restore testing documentation available, which will exactly walk you through how to configure certain things, how to do the post-processing, simple Lambda functions, and all those things that you can get there.
Okay, awesome. This has been great. Thanks for the demo. We will see you back here after our next break.
Thank you.